Okay, I've already downloaded Access Lab 6 instructions, and this lab deals with reports. So I'm going to open the instruction file. The first thing we need to do is open the work file from Blackboard that we downloaded from Blackboard, enable editing, and create a one-to-many relationship between the student ID field and all three tables in the database file. We're going to select Enforce Referential Integrity, and then we're going to click the Create button. So I will minimize my directions file. I'm going to open my work file. I do have the security warning, so I will have to enable editing or enable content. And then up on the ribbon to create a one-to-many relationship, you're going to click on the Database Tools. And in the Relationships section, you're going to click on the Relationships button. It then will open the Show Table dialog box, and you have your relationship window in the background. We're going to have to select all three tables, so just make sure the Tables tab is the active tab. And just click on the very first one, very first table, click the Add button. Click on the second table, minus student hours, and click on Add. Click on the third table, student ID and addresses, and click Add. We have all of our tables, so now we can close the Show Table window. And our primary table, our one table, which is known as the primary table, is your student ID and address because it has the student ID and the name in it. If you look at our secondary tables, which is the GPA table and the student hours, all they have is the student ID. They don't have the name in there. So your primary table is student ID and addresses. And to build a one-to-many relationship, we're going to position the primary table in the first column in the relationship window. And so what we're going to have to do is move it. So if you left click on the title bar where it says student ID and address, hold your mouse button down and drag it down. That's the one. Our other two secondary tables are the GPA table and the student hours there again, because all they have is the student ID with other information. They don't have the student ID with the name. And so you're going to left click on those title bars and arrange them in the second column next to your primary table. It does not matter whether it's student IDs is on the first one or their GPAs on the second. This order doesn't matter. So just position the other two tables next to your primary table. And to build a relationship, you left click on the student ID field in the student ID and address table. So left click on the student ID field in the student ID address table, and left click, hold that mouse button down, drag it over, and point to the student ID field in the student hours table or GPA, whichever one you have first there, and let go. In the edit relationship window, we're going to enforce referential integrity, and what that does is that provides us not to make any orphans. And what that means is it will not allow me to add a student ID and current hours and cumulative hours in the student hours table if there is not a student with that ID already in the student ID and address. If it allowed me to do that, then I would have a student ID with hours, but I wouldn't have a name. So that's what enforce referential integrity will safeguard from. So click at the Create button. And we're going to do the same step again from the student ID field in the student ID address table to the GPA table. So left click student ID field in the student ID and address table. Hold that mouse button down and drag and point to the student ID field in the GPA table and let go. And enforce referential integrity so that it will not allow us to enter a student ID with a GPA and major if they don't exist in our primary table, meaning they don't have a name. So click Create. And now we're going to have to save the relationship. If I go over here and close it, it's automatically going to ask me to save it because it knows I haven't saved it. Or you can, since you know you have to save it, up here on the Quick Access toolbar, you can click on the diskette, save it, and then close it. So either way, whether you close and save or save and close, it doesn't matter. It's still going to make you save it. It's not going to let you close it unless it is saved. It knows whether it's saved or not. I'll bring up my instruction file from my taskbar at the bottom. So we performed step 2. Step 3, we're going to use the report wizard based on the student ID and address table that displays all the students' information except for the student ID and the phone. We're going to add no grouping to the report. We're going to sort the report in ascending order by the student's last name and then the first name. Format the report layout to be tabular and portrait. Name the report student home addresses. And we'll have an example of what it should look like. I'm going to bring up my Access work file from the taskbar at the bottom of my screen. On your ribbon, click on the Create tab. We've already done tables, we've already done queries, we've already done forms. We're basic on the last major entity that you use in the database files, and that's a report. So click on Report Wizard. Now this needs to be based on the student ID and address table. So right here where it says Table, click the drop down arrow and select Student ID and Address Table. Now since we're going to be using all the fields but 2, I'm going to go ahead and select all fields in the selected side and then just move the 2 over that I don't want. So the 2 that we weren't going to use is the student ID, so I'm going to send it back, and the phone, and I'm going to send it back. So we're in a wizard. All we do is keep answering each question on each window or screen, and keep clicking the next button until we get to finished. So I'm going to click next. The directions say no grouping, so we don't want to touch this at all. Just click next to accept the defaults. We're sorting it by student last name. So drop down the arrow, do last name, ascending order. Drop down the next arrow and then first name, and then click next. And we want the report tabular portrait. So accept the defaults here. Click next. And we're going to call it student home addresses. Click finish. And we're going to look at the report and compare it to the one in our document. And it pretty much looks the same except our zip code. You'll look on step 4. We're going to switch to design view and widen any field controls to make all information in the report visible. Okay, so I'm going to bring up my Access work file. And if you'll notice here, our zip code is got some crazy characters in there. So what the problem is this field is not wide enough for the characters that we have in there. So I'm going to close the print preview. We need to make sure we're in design view. So on the view button, just make sure you're in design view. And these last 2 controls here, you have your zip code controls. They're not wide enough. So what we're going to do is just click on the first one in the page header. Hold your control key down to click on the zip code in the detailed section. And what I'm going to do is widen both at the same time. Once you click on them, you should have this orange or yellowish border around it. And point to the right side, the center of the right side of the control. There's a little square there. When you point to that little square, make sure that your pointer changes to a black plus sign with an arrow pointing to the left and right. Once you have your pointer is in that shape, left click your mouse button, drag to the left. Ooh, I'm sorry. I got the border instead. Okay, let's go back. Make sure it's an arrow pointing to the left and right. It's not a plus sign. It's just the arrow pointing left and right, and now control it. I got the other control. Okay, let's see if we've widened the columns enough to see the zip code now. So on your view button, go back to report view, and now I can see the zip code. I can see everything. Okay, I'm going to bring up my directions now, my Word document. And the next step, we're going to use the report wizard based on the student ID addresses table and the GPA tables. Display the student's last name and first name from the student ID and address table, and from the GPA table, we're going to display the major and GPA fields. We're going to group this by major. We're going to sort it in descending order by GPA. We're going to format the layout to, I may have to change that to tabular. I was using a different version of Excel, Access when I was doing this, and this version that I have is saying tabular. So if you have stepped or tabular, that may be a problem, depending on the version you're using. Okay, and then we're naming the report Major GPA Report. Okay, so, and this, we have an example of what it should look like. So this is called the Major GPA because it's sorted. If you notice, it's grouped by majors. And within the major, you have your GPA. And the GPA should be in descending order within each major. Okay, so I'm going to bring up my Access file. I'm going to go ahead and close this report. If it asks you to save the changes, say yes. Okay, I'll bring up my Access file. And we're going to use the report wizard. So on the ribbon, click on the Create tab. In the Reports group, click the Report Wizard. This is going to be based on student ID address and GPA tables. So I'm going to, first off, select the student ID and address table. And from this table, we need the last name, then the first name. And then from the GPA table, so I'm going to go up here and now click the drop down arrow, switch to the GPA table. I need the major and the GPA. Click the next button, and we want to group this by major. So you either double click major or click major and click this selector arrow, whichever method, but major should come up here because we're going to group by major. Click the next. We're going to sort in descending order by GPA. So I'm going to drop down my arrow. I'm going to select GPA, but we want descending order. So this ascending and descending button is a toggle button. So all I have to do is click on it once. It will change it to descending. Click the next button. And this one does have stepped. Okay, so this one's fine. The stepped is the right version. So we want the layout to be stepped in portrait. So click next. And we're going to call it major. Major GPA report. And click your finish button. And I'm going to compare this, what I have, with my Word document, and it pretty much looks the same. Okay, we will go on to the next step. So we're going to save and close the Major GPA report. I'll bring up Access. We're going to save it and close it. Okay, the next report we're going to do is we're going to use the report wizard based on the student ID and addresses and GPA tables. We're going to display the student ID, last name, first name, and city from the student ID and address table. From the GPA table, we're going to display the student's major. Group the report by city. So this report will be all the students from the same city grouped together. So all the Conway students will be in this report together, all the Greenbrier students. So you're grouping them by city. We're going to sort the report in ascending order by the student's last name, then first name. We're going to format the layout to be stepped in portrait, and name it city report. Okay, on my ribbon, I will select the Create tab, if necessary. In the Reports group, I'm going to click the Report Wizard. This is going to be based on the student ID and address table, so I'm going to drop down the Table Queries button, arrow, select student ID and addresses. And from the student ID and address table, the fields that we want are the student ID, the last name, and I'm just double clicking on these. You can easily, in the first name, you can just click on the first name in the arrow selector, so whichever method you want, and the city. And then now from the GPA table, so I need to change my table up here, drop down the arrow, go to GPA table. From the GPA table, we need the major. Click the next button. The directions said to group this by city. So either double click city or click once and click the selector arrow. So make sure city's up here. Click the next button. We want it to sort it in ascending order by the last name and then the first name. So it'll be last name and then first name. Click next. Format it so it's stepped and portrait. So just click next. And we're going to name this City Report. And then we're going to click the Finish button to run it. And we have our report based on the city. Every student from Conway's grouped together, Greenbrier, Morrilton, Valonia, etc. And so now we're going to save and close the city report. I'll bring up Access, and I'm going to close Print Preview. I'm just going to go back, if I have to the report view, save it, and close it. I'll bring up my directions file. The next report we're going to do is based on the student ID and address table and GPA again. We need the student ID, last name, first name from the student ID and address table, and from the GPA table we're going to have the GPA, major, and minor. We're going to group by major, and we're going to display the average, min, max GPA for each major. We're going to sort the report in descending order by GPA, and the format layout will be stepped and portrait, and we're going to name it Average, Min, Max GPA Report. Okay, I will bring up my Access file, my work file, and we're going to do the Report Wizard. So up on the ribbon, click on the Create tab, and in the Reports group, click the Report Wizard. From the Student ID and Address table, I will drop down my arrow, go to Student ID and Address table. We want the student ID, last name, first name, and from the GPA table, so now switch to your GPA table by clicking the drop down arrow. We want the student's GPA, major, and minor. So click your next button in the Report Wizard. We want to group this by major, so either double click major or click once in the arrow selector, either method. Just make sure it has major up here at the top. Click the next button. And we're going to sort this in descending order. Descending order by GPA. Now we will need to do these calculations. So we want average, min, max. You have a button here called Summary Options. Click on it. I'm sorry, we're supposed to do descending, right? Let me read. Yeah. Sort by major, display. Sort by descending order. So I had to toggle that to descending. Now click the Summary Options. And what we want is the average, min, and max GPA. So check mark the average, check mark under the min, and check mark under the max, and click OK. Okay, so now click the next button, and we still are sticking with the stepped and portrait layout. So that's what's selected. So click next to accept the default. And the name of this report is AVG for average, MIN for min, MAX for max, GPA report. So what reports is, it's kind of like queries. They're really good. They retrieve a lot of information for you. Click Finish. And what we're going to do here is you can see the art major, because we group by major. Here's their GPAs and the students, and the GPA should be in descending order. Here's the average GPA from these students, the min and the max. If you look at biology, we have 4 students. The GPA appears in descending order. The average GPA is 2.925, the min was 2.3, and the max was 3.7. And so you can go through here and you will see by the grouping, they're grouped by each major with the GPA in descending order, and you will see the average, min, and max for each one in the major. Okay, I'm going to bring up my instruction file. I compared this to the one in the one that I just did, and it came out right. So we're going to save and close the average min max GPA report. So I'll bring up access. I'm going to close print preview. It takes me to the design view. All you have to do is click the view button and you go back to the report view. I'm going to save it up here using the quick access toolbar, and then I'm going to close it. I'll bring up my instructions. Our next report will be based on the student ID and address table and the student hours table. We're going to display the student ID, last name, first name from the student ID and address table, and from the student hours table, we want the fields cumulative hours and current. We have no grouping for this report. We're going to sort it ascending order by the student's last name, then first name. We're going to stick with the layout stepped and portrait, and we're going to name the report Student Hours Report. Okay, this is our last one. So I'll bring up my access work file from the taskbar. On the ribbon, the Create tab, we're going to click on the Report Wizard button in the Report section. And from the Student ID and Address table, drop down your arrow, select the Student ID and Address table. We want the student ID, the last name, then the first name. And then from the Student Hours table, so drop down your arrow, go to Student Hours. We want the cumulative hours and the current hours. Click your Next button. No grouping, so accept the default here of no grouping, so just click Next. This is going to be sorted in ascending order by last name and then first name, so click Next. Oh, my bad. And we're going to, okay, this is where we're going to have to do tabular. We're going to do tabular this time in portrait. Click Next. We're going to name this Student Hours Report. Click Finish. And it should just be a report of all the students and their hours. Our fields are getting cut off again here. We can't see them all. So when you look at the next step, switch to design view and widen any field controls to make all the information visible. So we need to make sure we see the student ID, cumulative, and current hours. So what you have to do is close print preview, come in here, and you're going to click on, like say, the current hours control in the header. Hold your control key down and click on the control box for the current hours, and then point to that square that's on the left hand side, on the right hand side, and just what you're going to have to do is just kind of play with them and widen them, and then go back on your view button, click on the report view, and look and see if you've got them widened. So that you just have to kind of play with it. Go back and forth to the design view to select both controls. You'll left click on the first one, hold your control key down and click on the second so that you can do both at the same time. If you point to any one of the borders on it and your pointer changes to an arrow or plus sign with arrows pointing left and right, up and down, that means you're moving it. So I can actually move these. Then I can actually size them by any of the sizing handles, make them wider. And so just go back and forth till you see all of them appear, so that you see all the fields and all the values. So we'll go back to my directions file. We're going to exit access to close the database and submit your assignment via Blackboard. If you have any problems, let me know.